morning. This is Jan Mazzotti reporting from the Global New Energy Summit at the Broadmoor in Colorado Springs. With me now is Vice Admiral Dennis McGinn, the president of the American Council on Renewable Energy. And Admiral McGinn, thank you so much for being with us today.
It's great to be with you here, Jan, especially here at the beautiful Broadmoor on the Front Range. I think it's a great and beautiful environment in which to have a conversation about moving from an energy economy that's primarily dominated by fossil fuel to one of clean energy and renewable energy.
Absolutely. And I know you play a big role there at ACORE in trying to facilitate these conversations, both domestically as well as globally, around new energy alternatives and the way they work with traditional energy solutions. Can you tell us a little bit more about ACORE and what you're doing?
Sure. The American Council on Renewable Energy is focused on creating a more secure and prosperous America and a more secure and prosperous world with clean renewable energy. It's important that we take into consideration energy security, economic security, and environmental security, and that environmental security has to be at the local, regional, and global levels as we make better choices, more sustainable choices for our energy portfolio. And that energy portfolio has to take into consideration not just the production of electricity, as important as that is to quality of life and economic growth, but our transportation needs as well. So ACORE takes a look at all of the technologies, whether it's solar, wind, geothermal, hydro, tidal energy, biomass, all of the forms of renewable energy that can be used in various parts of the world to produce electricity and to contribute to our transportation energy.
Well, and Admiral McGinn, you have talked about how oil is really the lifeblood of our economy here in the United States, and yet 50%, over 50% of our trade imbalance is really due to the import of oil from other places, and that really poses serious threats to the national security, both here and abroad, for U.S. interests. Can you discuss that a little bit and help frame up that bigger conversation that really underlies that statement?
Sure. Nationally in the United States and globally, our overdependence on petroleum, as good as it has been to us over the past 100 or 150 years, creates challenges that are diplomatic, military, and economic. You mentioned one of the economic ones. More than 50% of our trade deficit in the United States is because of the need to pay for imported oil. It basically is an unaffordable addiction going forward. And as we discover new reserves of oil, both domestically and globally, we need to understand that a lot of the easy oil has already been extracted from the earth. So there are going to be more direct costs and there are going to be more environmental risks in going after these new reserves. The other thing that is inexorable is that large economies like India, China, and the developing world get their economies more and more dependent on oil, for example, all energy really, but oil especially. We need to recognize that the supply and demand curves for petroleum are divergent. It's going to become more costly, it will become more competitive, and hopefully that competition won't lead to conflict as it has in the 20th century on several occasions where the United States has actually had to go to war over energy resources. We can avoid that. We can avoid it by, first of all, energy efficiency, using every drop of oil, every kilowatt hour of electricity to squeeze the most quality of life and the most economic value out of it, just energy efficiency across the board. Secondly, we need to diversify our portfolio of transportation energy and also our portfolio of how we produce electricity. In transportation, that portfolio can take into consideration more and more biofuels, for example, biodiesel, ethanol from second-generation feedstocks, for example. And we can do this in a way that creates better choices for consumers at the pump. Instead of just having 97% of our transportation dependent on oil, gasoline, and diesel, we ought to be able to have a much more robust blend of sustainable fuels, biofuels.
Well, and I know over at ACORE that the organization is really focused on three major initiatives. Can you tell listeners a little bit about those initiatives and what impacts you guys hope to see going forward by the work that you're doing?
We've got three new strategic initiatives, Jan, this year. First is with the Department of Defense. The Department of Defense and the military services have really gotten serious over the past 3 to 4 years on the need to diversify their energy portfolio and get off of so much overdependence on fossil fuel. So we are working with the Department of Defense and with the private sector, our ACORE membership and partner organizations, to smooth the transaction space between the ever-growing requirements for clean energy technology that the military services have and the private sector's ability to deliver it, to include mobilizing private capital, for example, in public-private partnerships to be able to acquire cleaner energy technology, to be able to invest in biofuels. So that partnership with the Department of Defense is really valued by our membership and partner organizations, and especially by the military services working with us. The second initiative has to do with the production of electrical power and the electrical power infrastructure. We are partnered with the Electric Power Research Institute, EPRI, the National Renewable Energy Lab, California Clean Energy Fund, and others to conduct a series of forums that look for the roadblocks, if you will, to scaling up renewable energy in our electricity mix in the United States and figuring out ways to remove those roadblocks, just simply by bringing into the room power companies, utilities, independent system operators, regulators from the federal level down to state and regional level, rate-paying organizations, large consumers of electricity, and the developers of renewable energy projects, financiers of renewable energy, so that we can have conversations that say, hey, we can figure out how to do this from an engineering standpoint to make sure the electricity is where and when you need it, and also that we can create a much smoother value chain so that those who are putting in the work and assuming the cost get a reward on their investment. The third initiative, strategic initiative by ACORE, has to do with transportation. Clearly, biofuels is a big part of that, but it's not just that. As our infrastructure for transportation becomes more and more electrified, if you will, we are working with automobile companies like General Motors, airplane manufacturers like Boeing, and other domestic and foreign companies that make things, vehicles, airplanes, boats, and also the transportation infrastructure that will increasingly be using renewable energy. And that dialogue is ongoing now, and it's been very helpful.
Well, and Admiral McGinn, in your talks at the Global New Energy Summit, you alluded to the role of government in moving new policy forward and moving this agenda into the next phases. Can you discuss a little bit or share with us your thoughts on the government's role in moving energy policy forward and what that sort of looks like?
There is a good and proper role for government and a good and proper role for the private sector in moving us to a clean energy economy. When you hear folks say that big government is the enemy or that mandates are unacceptable or that government incentive programs or loan guarantees, they just aren't aware of the reality of the situation. Our government, in our history in the United States of doing big projects with big government, is really wonderful. Just think about the Tennessee Valley Authority, just unbelievable electricity that has been delivered cheaply and reliably to millions, tens of millions of customers in the central part of our country for many decades because big government made investments, working with the private sector to produce a TVA and all of the hydropower, fossil fuel power, nuclear power that is benefiting our economy and quality of life in that region of the country now. The Apollo program, putting astronauts on the moon. Manhattan Project in the darkest part of World War II, and then subsequently in the Cold War. The development of the Internet, the development of nuclear power by the U.S. Navy, and resulting today in having 104 nuclear power plants for peaceful civilian power production around our country. So there is a proper role for government. Government can't, nor should they do it all, but neither can the private sector. The private sector has a key role to play, and it's a matter of having the intelligent conversations, reaching across the aisle and deciding what are the problems that we're trying to solve, how best in a balanced way can we have government working in conjunction with the private sector. It isn't one way or the other. And so folks that take extreme views about this, that no mandate is good, no government is good, they're just not being realistic.
Well, Admiral McGinn, my co-host Kelly De La Torre is certainly more well-versed on the specifics of renewables and the energies specifically. And so I'm going to hand over the interview to Kelly to really delve a little bit deeper into the work that's being done by ACORE in very specific terms around the renewable technologies.
Admiral McGinn, I want to let you know that I've been very impressed with ACORE's efforts in this area, and that we come out of I know that you mentioned that ACORE has these military forums where you're smoothing the transaction space. Every one that we've had the first one, and then we've had subsequent calls, and those are always very targeted, and they find issues, and you talk about solutions to those issues. And so I'm very optimistic. In my law practice, I work with emerging companies, mostly in the energy clean tech space, and then I also work on the large renewable energy and transmission project side. And we have a lot of technologies, as you've acknowledged, out there that can answer a lot of these questions. And there are a few companies that are frustrated. They have a yes from the feet on the ground and a yes on the top, and somewhere in the middle they get lost. Do you have any advice for those companies?
Well, I would say come to our forums, first of all, because you'll have an opportunity to meet other companies. You'll have a chance to meet people in the Department of Defense and the military services, from those who set requirements, those who run acquisition programs, program managers, contracting officers. The challenge, of course, is that it's a very, very complex system. There are a lot of different kinds, size, shape, and focus areas for different companies, and a lot of different size, shape, and focus areas for the military requirements. We're trying to match those up as best we can. It can't be done in any one conference. That's why we decided last year that we need a series of conversations, a series of forums. So we had the first one in Arlington in January. We're going to have the next one in Washington at the L'Enfant Plaza Hotel on the 9th of May, and we'll have a continuing series of these, and we really try to take into consideration the feedback from each of the conferences and the participants in our steering committee that consists of people in the renewable energy space, companies that have questions about specific areas, whether it's a large Army request for information to the tune of $7 billion, or the Navy's 1 gigawatt initiative, biofuels by the Air Force and U.S. Navy to power 50% of their mobile equipment by 2020. So it's a very, very broad and complex challenge, but I think we are making progress in bringing together the right kinds of people and the right kinds of information to move ahead.
Yes, I definitely agree. I think that ACORE is really moving this issue forward, and I agree that companies should get involved because we have valuable technology out there that can answer a lot of these questions. And one of the stories that I really like to hear is the troop in Afghanistan with the flexible solar panels. Could you tell that story?
Sure. It really is just so illustrative, Kelly, of the military's use of renewable energy and energy efficiency technology. India Company, 3rd Battalion, 5th Marines, deployed to Afghanistan into Helmand Province in the Sangin area in December 2010. It was one of the most fought over areas of Afghanistan. In fact, to the extent that within about the first month that India Company was there, they lost, wounded or killed 25% of those Marines. They had been equipped by the foresight of the Marine Corps Expeditionary Energy Office and the Commandant at the time, General Jim Conway, with some renewable energy technology and energy efficiency. So the renewable energy technology took two forms. One was fixed solar panels, photovoltaic panels, to help power the forward operating bases in very remote, austere areas, kind of at the end of the logistics pipeline. And they had the benefit of very, very significantly reducing their dependence on diesel fuel, diesel generators to produce power to conduct operations in these forward operating areas. To the extent that in some cases the reduction in the need for diesel fuel for the generators was 75 or 85% less than what it had been before these photovoltaic panels were in there. So that took Marines off the road, having to guard convoys, reduce casualties, and the reason the Marine Corps was doing this was because it was good for mission and combat effectiveness. At the same time, they deployed with flexible solar arrays, thin film solar panels, that they could use to recharge rechargeable batteries. And the modern Marine or soldier today requires a lot of batteries for night vision goggles, communications equipment, GPS, all of the things that they rely on to make them so combat effective. In the past, you could find a reconnaissance patrol by just following the trail of discarded batteries. It was just really unbelievable. Each Marine was carrying up to 25 pounds in their rucksack of batteries to sustain them over a 3 or 4 day reconnaissance patrol. So with the introduction of flexible solar panels, they were able to reduce that weight to about 5 pounds of rechargeable batteries and take more food, water, ammunition, and make themselves more sustainable, more combat effective, and more stealthy in their reconnaissance patrols. So one of the things that really, really caught my attention was at one point, one of the forward operating bases came under attack by the Taliban with rocket-propelled grenades. After the battle was over and the Marines prevailed, they discovered some damage to some of these photovoltaic solar arrays. The electricity never went off. They didn't know that they had been damaged by these grenade fragments. And I thought, can you imagine if they had diesel generator sets instead of the photovoltaics? They would have blown up probably, secondary explosion, and Marines would have been killed or wounded. So it really is an illustrative point that the value of renewable energy, in this case photovoltaic panels, is beyond just producing electricity. It's sustainability, it's mission flexibility, and I say, if it's good enough for the United States Marine Corps in Afghanistan, what's wrong with the rest of America? Let's get going.
Yes, I completely agree. I just think that's an amazing story. And then bringing it back to the United States, I think a lot of the consumers don't recognize that the insecurity of our domestic infrastructure, both in terms of electricity generation as well as the energy delivery system, that also puts our troops at risk because of the unmanned air vehicles are flown from our domestic military grids. Our ordering services are done from the U.S. So if those go down, then we also are putting our troops at risk. And so that diversifying our generation portfolio and also bolstering our transmission grid is also helping to save lives. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, it really is. And as you point out, Kelly, many of the operations that are happening halfway around the world are supported directly, logistically, with intelligence information, with surveillance and reconnaissance right here in the United States. So if the electrical power goes down on these bases for any prolonged period of time, that is not a good thing. It directly affects the lives and the mission effectiveness of troops around the world in actual combat. So the idea is that the Department of Defense is trying to make their bases more resilient by doing net zero microgrids, by using more and more distributed generation, by having a portfolio that has some fossil fuel, some compressed gas, some wind, solar, hydro, depending on where the base is and what the renewable energy assets are. And I think that this is really good, not just for the military missions and the bases, but it can be applied to communities around the country. There are a lot of sustainable clean city initiatives that the military is benefiting from, the technology, the best practices that they are adopting on a military basis. And as the military invests in some of these technologies and practices and processes, the communities will benefit as well.
So, going back to that comment then, is there a way to do, I know that ACORE is working at sort of the top level and working with these companies, is there a way to do it more locally? Should there be some more grassroots efforts and to take that, what's learned in those clean cities?
It really varies. You mentioned before that sometimes you get the real support from the top and at the bottom at the base level, but somewhere in between it gets lost, and that has to do with the federal procurement rules and all of that kind of stuff. But I think that the dialogue really has to start at the local level. I think that working with base commanders, regional commanders, and the utilities, the regulators, and the technology companies, that can really help to identify the best solution sets to address some of these challenges. And that can be pushed up the chain of command, so to speak. At the same time, those companies need to be talking to the folks that are in the acquisition and procurement business, in the contracting business, in that middle area to see what can be done. I know that all of the services are very serious about smoothing their acquisition process, both by letting people in the private sector, small and mid-sized companies, know what is needed, as well as trying to make their procurement officers, their requirements people, more accessible to the good ideas that are out there.
Well, thank you so much, Admiral McGinn. Where can people find out more about ACORE and your initiatives?
We have a good website. It's ACORE, ACORE.org, and the initiatives about utility, working with utility and power infrastructure are there, DOD and transportation. And just click on them, and if it's not there, if you can't find it, there's an area that you can make an inquiry, ask us a question, and we look forward to working with you.
Thank you so much. It's great information, and you're doing really amazing things that are really necessary. Thank you.